Thank you for joining me. My name is Colin Davis, and this is some thoughts on the science and art of shaping the deep through kill contracts. My intent here is to caption lessons learned from my recent G35 experience during a warfighter exercise 2404 here in June. So what I want to cover is kind of what happened at that warfighter, what division and corps thought about shaping the deep as, what type of kill contract tactics, techniques, and procedures that were in place or developed during that warfighter. Kind of going through an application of a kill contract tool the G35 team and I helped develop during that, or refine or learned, and then kind of circle back and retouch a little bit about what doctrine may say about it, okay? And then wrap up and conclude. Big considerations here. This was my first warfighter exercise, so I'm very new to the operational level of warfare, and I probably don't know what I don't know. So if this is a lot of information that might actually be specified and captured and spelled out somewhere, please share that knowledge and reference source in the comments so I can check it out and everybody else can check it out as well. So I do hope you appreciate some of the info I have to share. So what happened? Okay. Orient you here. We got kind of a sketch of the main scenario. This was a Denovia in the East Europe type of scenario. I was part of the G35 team in the 38th Infantry Division headquarters. That division had 3 maneuver brigades. There was an so that was us in the middle. There was an infantry division to the east and a cav regiment brigade to the west. There was a brigade in the Corps Reserve as well, along with all sorts of Air Force assets. Denovia had approximately 3 divisions. 2 were in contact during the exercise. 1 was a reinforcing division, but did not get to the front before the exercise ended. So as you can see, moving from south to north, northeast, and Denovia was moving east to west, right? Initial meeting engagements, brigade was air assaulted in to this town, this urban area, along with the river here. We had to conduct a wet gap crossing. Denovia was advancing 2 C's G locks in order to control all of this, right? Denovia, they established a defensive belt along that G lock that we had to conduct offensive operations against. The Denovian division ended up spreading their brigade across 3 separate areas and cities. There was kind of some small villages over here. Toward the end, we were able to use the cav regiment to basically block and to isolate these 2 brigades, allowing our division to mass on the 1 brigade and sever the G-lock. Big takeaway here, while the ratio toward the end was advantageous to us, I do kind of wonder if the Op4 commander spread his brigades too thin intentionally, right? There wasn't a huge division or Corps, Combined Arms Army Reserve for them. It kind of gave us an easier fight. I don't really know if another adversary really would have done it as such. Now, the partner countries' local forces, during the warfighter exercise, I was not in a position to be able to see how effective they were, if they were just simulated, hand-waved, not in play at all, if anybody simulated them, served as pucksters. So that is just of note. All right, kind of moving on to shaping the deep a little bit from my perspective within being an assistant in G35. Core developed and assigned something called kill contract attrition rates in their order and subsequent frag orders. Okay, this established a measurement that Core would try and attrit prior to enemy elements entering into the division deep area of operations. And so, for example, it kind of specified this: a division and a hasty defense should be able to defeat uh, a brigade at less than 75% strength. The U.S. division in the attack can defeat a brigade in a hasty defense at less than 25% strength. In general, the Corps was responsible for 25% of the reduction effort. Then division was responsible for the next 50% prior to the brigades taking over their deep and close fights, the division close area. You can kind of see how this starts to it's kind of specifying who's going to do what and provides the framework to kind of get after the problem of how do we put us in positions of advantage for the next operation. Corps did identify general units that they were going to focus on attriting by phase. But note, while the Corps order stated they would shape those in practice, whether it was deliberate or natural based off the warfighter exercise scenario, exercise design as a training objective, or we're all just humans and we all have limited bandwidth that the Corps players could only handle. They often needed division to nominate and say, hey, Corps, this is who and what you should shape. How much have you shaped? Hey, man, are you upholding to your contract or not? It wasn't a situation where it could just let them go and they would just take care of it, right? It was some bottom-up refinement and top-down as well. Division then would assign other kill contract attrition rates with the subordinate brigades as well within its operations order. The operations order established this, like you see above, in overall percentages. Okay, translation needed to happen from just general percentages. Hey, reduce a enemy brigade or division to less than 75% strength, or less than 25, or 1/3. Get a 3-to-1 ratio, a 4-to-1, a 2-to-1, whatever. That translation still needed to happen from the general big hand wave of put it at those percentages or force ratios, so people could understand. The first half of the exercise, that was hard to understand. We're trying to attrit the enemy all over the place, and we're getting some effects, but it was hard to understand what conditions were shaped. Are we meeting the specific force ratio numbers or percentages, right? So our team and myself, after the mid rotation AAR, we started to get with the G2 ACE. I can't recall exactly what that acronym stands for. They're in the G2, and then the ORSA. We defined those numbers, what the force ratio numbers or the specific percentages actually was, and we had to do some analysis on what platforms or vehicles or dismounted elements, like what does that actually mean? Then our team then presented this to the targeting working group, the current operations integration cell, and the commanding general. They used all this along with items like the high payoff target list to be more effective. And there was a significant change after the mid-row AAR, and we started doing this to, they're working on attriting here, and they started attriting here. And we could then know what objectives were shaped properly, if the enemy's disruption zone was ready or not to begin offensive operations, and helped with transitions. We used the correlation of forces and means tool to determine the initial force ratio, and then the needed force ratio to be at position of advantage. Then we applied that percentage to the enemy's order of battle, ORBAT, modified table of organization of equipment, MTO, etc. This generated an actual defined number to attrit, and we could then track it. I grouped these forces by air defense artillery, RD, maneuver, etc. And let's check it out. This was the original tool here. What we came up with, it was in a standard Excel document. Okay, grouped it by the different objective, basically AOs, right, in space, where different elements were. You jump down to the bottom and we'd list out who's there by intel and what we saw at the COIC. Then who's going to be applied to that, the brigade or brigades that are going to be going toward that. That kind of helped us get the initial correlation of forces and means, the COFM. Then we built out from, again, like I was saying, between the G2 and the ORSA with the G5 section, the base amount that artillery, ADA, maneuver, and others had, like the real significant combat power of those elements. Good Colonel, as part of the targeting working group, was talking about, hey, it's not a whole enemy brigade that needs to get down, to have the 3-to-1. It's like the tanks or air defense artillery. So we set goals, right? The attack aviation, combat aviation brigade or tactical aviation brigade. They kept changing it every other day. They're like, we need to reduce 75% of all surface-to-air missiles and then 100% of radars. Okay, then they wanted, say, 2/3 of the artillery. We defined, we needed X amount of tanks to get down to the proper COFM and so on and so forth. And we did that by objective. This was one of the defensive belts. This is where the reconnaissance brigade in the Rista was located at. So we developed this initially. Then, in addition, we developed a whiteboard, like just pure analog whiteboard. Didn't have a lot of printing capability. And this was kind of the Kill Contract Tracker version 1. Okay, way more simple. Took it to the targeting working group, briefed those, took it to different briefs, made sure that the COIC got copies so they could update what was getting attritted in the deep area, the core deep and the division deep. And we'd come back periodically throughout the shifts and see how it was going. Touch base with everybody. And that way we could define, are the conditions set for the next transition? Because they had the good high payoff target list, and it's a good tool. It's not quite defined enough for like how much by these priorities has to be or where, right? It's one needs the other, or I don't know if there's a current in a single tool or not, right? This is what we developed. It was very useful, so that's why I'm sharing. And that's the basis of what we developed. Again, go back one, it was kind of by the combat power, what they initially have, defined by the goal that needed to be attritted to be in a position of advantage, and then we tracked what was currently destroyed, so we could tell the commander and the other section chiefs, this is where we're at. This is the conditions that need to still be done. We've met the conditions. It's about that time to go on the offense or defense, or consolidate, reorganize, or whatever, right? It tried to paint the picture for the boss to make good decisions, do his job more effectively. So now let's transition to applying it. We've kind of developed and refined this Kill Contract tool a little bit. This is going to kind of go into how to eat the elephant of all the force ratios. Hey, you've got an enemy division in front of you, and this is how we kind of go through it. Total Vixen packs. We'll go through key weapon systems or key systems in general, and then echelons because they're not all weapon systems. And then I'll talk about how to choose what priority in order to set those conditions. So stand by as we transition. Okay. Here we are at kind of a refined kill contract tool. We're going to walk through applying that to another scenario situation within an Olvana scenario. Cut, retry. Okay, so here is the kill contract tool. This one's a little more refined from the initial version we created at the Warfighter exercise. It'll be with an Olvana example to apply as we go through it. Wanted to kind of show a little bit of the operational framework so you can kind of get this visually in time and space for you. Now, given that Olvana doesn't necessarily have a division equivalent, they have group armies. I chose the 10th Group Army as a good example, and you can see how it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 to 6 maneuver brigades plus a bunch of battalions, and it's got all the good stuff. This is potentially how they might generally array themselves in like their disruption zone, the main battle area, and the rear area. The 10th Group Army probably has 39,000 pieces of equipment and approximately 70,000 personnel. So you can start to kind of see why trying to get to a 3-to-1 force ratio advantage isn't doable with straight total equipment or personnel. If you have to reduce this division down to 1/3 in order for a U.S. division to take it on in the offense, that's trying to reduce 2/3 of 70,000 people, and that's just not feasible. We don't have the time. The Class 5, outside of just using all of our nukes, and that's probably not the proper way by using the law of land warfare to go about it. You don't need to do that in order to force them to make moves and changes and respond to you to be at advantage. This is each of those brigades broken down to their significant IMTO, their significant number of vehicles and platoons. I've grouped them up into all the personnel into significant echelons, and those are probably the dismounted maneuver platoons: reconnaissance, engineers, infantry, armor, but they need to be dismounted because we're already going to be tracking vehicles aside from that. So here's how you start to eat the elephant one bite at a time by breaking it down and figuring out which bites to take, right? Again, 39,000 pieces of equipment and 70,000 personnel. The mechanized brigade, right? While it may have 3,200 pieces of equipment and 6,800 personnel, really there's probably 855 significant pieces of equipment and 51 platoons. That's probably the more real combat power to focus on when we're tracking force ratios, the COFOMs. It's the significant combat power. And this is what I've kind of found. Again, I've taken this from the good odin.tradoc.army.mil site that the Tradoc G2 team puts together and runs. It's a great source. do know caveat-wise that you have to follow what the S2 says the MTOW and ORBAT is going to be. You can't just go off the base date and Odin site, because they're only going to be like an 80% baseline solution, right? Every force is going to be tailored, and they may not have, for example, February 2022, they're and the offense there in Eastern Europe. Those mechanized forces did not have a lot of dismounted elements in the back to provide good combined arms warfare. That was an issue for them. They paid the price for that, along with other things, right? But let's continue. I digress. So air defense artillery, I've kind of grouped it into that short, medium, and long range, and then radars. As you can see, the mech brigade may have 18 and 9 pieces of those surface-to-air missile systems, 1 medium range, and then 3 radars. That's the significant combat power of ADA we have to be concerned about, or I think we need to be concerned about, and it seemed to be the valuable information our division needed during the warfighter, right? Artillery, 24 pieces of mortars, and I'll kind of talk about this a little bit later, but one of the good OCs from the Mission Command Training Program was giving me some refinement back. He's like, I'm not really sure we should be worried about the mortars. We don't have enough Class 5. That's something the brigades probably can handle in their brigade deep and close fight. Okay. A lot of what I noticed in Denovia and Ovana, they've got tracked and wheeled mortar gun combos. Right? It's not necessarily just pure dismounted off the trailer 120 tubes, right? But I take his point, right? I'm a first timer here, and that's why I don't include it in the actual Kill Contract Tool for this refined version. But then howitzers, 18, MLRS, MRLS, multiple launch rocket systems, multiple rocket launch systems, however you want to spell it out, whoever is using what acronym version for that day, do know that, right? And then the counter battery radars and their systems, right? For armored personnel, carriers and infantry fighting vehicles, this is what's important for the mechanized brigade, 23, 217, and 23. That's the significant combat power. Now, there's other armored fighting vehicles, kind of like our new M10 Booker mobile protected fire, the type, the ZTL 11s, type 11s. There's 44 of those. That's significant combat power you want to find and reduce, so the brigades have a lot easier fight. And then armored trucks. This is kind of something to be refined and thought about a little bit more, because for dismounted light brigades or motorized or mechanized, right? How much combat power does an armored truck with a 50 cal Mark 19 or eventually maybe 30 Mike we'll see how much do they constitute. It's definitely probably not nothing for the maneuver brigades. It's probably something you may not necessarily have to worry about in something like the ADA or FA brigades. It's an issue, especially if you have a deep raid or something, for sure. Maybe it's case by case specific. I'll default to the MET-TC, right? But do know you got to use your judgment, and you can't just apply wholesale blanket on this type of numbers and analysis. And then the dismounted platoons, 51. Again, that's a combination of dismounted engineers, recon, infantry, so on and so forth. Those who are going to be in the defensive fighting positions or in the assaulting elements or support by fire elements in operations, right? They might be the ones conducting area security, the MPs as well, could be included in this. It's while everybody has a weapon system, a rifle or a pistol, a sidearm, these are going to be the significant dismounted combat echelon elements. So that's why I've kind of defined it as such. And then movement, mobility, counter mobility, survivability, ton of different platforms. Maybe later in a future version, I'll break this down between each of the mobility, counter mobility, survivability, or offense and defense, so we can identify if we are looking to be on the offense, and we can shape their counter mobility, defensive dig assets early enough, great position of advantage for setting conditions. And then likewise, if we're on defense, we want to focus on their breaching equipment, their mobility, not necessarily their counter mobility. But I did not define that currently in this version. Probably is a future version thing, or a good thing for S2s to do for us. There's a ton of them. Right now, other kind of lumped up: command, reconnaissance, and EW. And that is wrapped up by the UAVs and any other type of aviation. You can see that while it says there's 40, I'm waiting to see what Trade-Out G2 kind of does with that. Is that going to triple, quadruple? I'll be real curious to see how that plays out, especially with replacements and stuff. That's something I had to have from the G2 was what type of replacement rates they had, so we could factor that in. Okay. And they did this for each of the brigades, as you can see, in special battalions, motorized, the tank, 466 pieces of equipment, and 33 platoons. That's the significant combat power to track. Reconnaissance battalion, 165 and 9. Right. Now it does get kind of interesting here as you kind of look at the field artillery, air defense artillery, aviation, and engineer. This is where I didn't really count the armed trucks, right? It's not the significant platoons of dismounts, of combat power they are providing to the fight. It's the 36 of those. It's the 18 HQ-16s, right? It's the radars. It's the EW 2106 HGRs, 24 KAMAZ SPN4s, the jammers, right? And then their UAVs, the ASN 207s. That's what kind of matters, right? That's the good information that we can turn into analysis that we can then use to more articulately shape the deep to set conditions to be in positions of advantage. Based off the good IMTO, okay? Now we go back, we use our framework, and we start to break down the fight in space, okay? Such as the disruption zone, objective 1, the reserve, and enablers. This is real simple. It's not 100% complete and fleshed out, but this should be enough to kind of walk through and apply how to use the tool to make good decisions. So in the disruption zone, templated both the RISTA and Recon Battalion. Say the SPF's doing something else, or they're in our rear area, or, just for example. Okay. This is the significant combat power that we need to look for. That's their base IMTO. Literally just added everything that they've got of significant combat power. Then we've defined the goal. The goals for each of these will come from the COFA, correlation of forces and means analysis. I have not done that here for this report. but it gives you, again, the initial ratio. It can kind of tell you, and you can play with it, what goal ratio you need to be at a position of advantage. And then the difference there is what you need to attrit. And then I would say each of the warfighting functions, like in the targeting working group, gets a vote. They get to say and provide feedback. I want 100% of the radars, because that allows us to bring more aviation to the fight and do great things. Okay. So 50% surface-to-air missiles, 100% radars, as an example, right? We need 2/3 of the vehicles destroyed for a mech brigade and 50% of the platoons, because they're going to be harder to find, more dispersed, and assess as attrited, neutralized, or destroyed. Okay. Maybe we need 75% of the counter battery radars, and then 2/3 of the artillery and rocket systems destroyed, right? This, from our side, I recommended. What do y'all think? I asked, what do y'all need? The boss would tell us what ratio he needs. It's a discussion to define. The definition, though, matters, right? As you can see now, it needs the translation of this from the initial, here's your op org, defining a percentage or force ratio for the kill contract, by who at corps or division or brigade is going to do what part of the percentage, and then translating it into something quantifiable. To me, this is both a little bit of science and art. You would list the friendly, like lead brigade or reconnaissance, cav reg, or whoever is going against them. More so on the ground side, on the maneuver, close fight side, eventually, right? So it'd be which brigade or brigades or whole division is going against this objective eventually, and what type of shaping needs to be done to set the conditions into favor. I would add sub-engineer battalions to this objective normally, right? I've got the engineer brigade. You can see this is only like step one. You would need to break this down by sub-engineer battalions if they are spread out to the different brigades, right? If this engineer brigade might have a battalion with these guys, and so on and so forth, right? You got to take that into account, do the analysis, and add them to that area. It can only be in one area at a given time. They might displace and drive or move, right? But you can't allow strawmen to be out on the battlefield. The enemy's everywhere, and they got all, unlimited everything. No, there's a finite amount, and you can shape them to your advantage. That's where this work comes from. So, given the goal, right? It's this at 50%. That's the goal. And then we would input how much has been destroyed or assessed destroyed based off live BDA or some type of IGIT intel, or just G2's assessment. When this number becomes 10 or above, so we're getting close to conditions being set on ADA, or hey, we hit 20. COIC has done a great job. The COIC and JAGIC have done an amazing work. It's good to go. We are there. You should feel confident that the brigade should be able to go on the offense against this objective and do good work. Same with the reserve, and then the enablers. Initially, on the initial example we did at the Warfighter, these type of enablers, there was an integrated fires command. Kind of put them by each of the objective, because their sub battalions were spread out among the objectives. Toward the end of the Warfighter exercise, I did kind of lump them by themselves, right? They're kind of their own elements, and they need their own shaped ratios. So if you wanted to really specify the kill contract ratios even further, not necessarily by like all the enemies got to be reduced to 3-to-1. It's for the ADA and artillery brigades, they need this in order for us to even get close to the objectives, right? You can see how commanders and warfighting function section chiefs will start to sequence the plans based off which conditions are set, where fires and attack aviation and other good effects should go. And same with Corps. This is kind of where we got the information to tell Corps, we want you to go work on these people because you haven't met your contract yet. You have met your contract yet now, and work on this, or start working on that next division that should be reinforcing. I do hope you appreciate this tool. If this is already out there, please, again, share where we can find that information in the comments so we can all learn from each other and become better. This is the Kill Contract Tool based off kind of where things are in space and time, and based off their MTO and what they're actually bringing to the fight. So now let's transition back to the PowerPoint briefing. Okay, things still to work on. There were non-kinetic gameisms, right, that I think still need to be worked out. During the warfighter, there's a human on both sides to decide how much attrition a unit should take before withdrawing them. Now, that's absolutely how it would be done in real life, right? The AI is not deciding those types of decision points yet. However, the gameism comes into, are they really treating their combat power as real life people and formations? There is a tendency for pucksters, Op4, Blue 4, to, and just like in normal video games, right? Like, you send them, right? If they get destroyed or killed, it's just a video game, right? Doesn't matter. If we lose them, doesn't matter. I'll spawn a new guy or whatever. There's a little bit of that. I got a little bit of sense that the opportunity for that was there. Okay. I don't really know what the Op4 personnel on the other side kind of had as their decision process to say, hey, fight to the stand here, fight to the last man, or withdraw to the next subsequent battle position. But I also don't believe the Army as a profession yet also kind of understands what are the historical normal expectation amounts to be able to think, hey, if I get them to this position, they might have to withdraw. It's not just kill them all. Sometimes it is. There's plenty of examples in history where those types of fights happened. There's plenty of fights where that didn't happen and wasn't the battlefield math, arithmetic, science to follow. And I'm sure if we put some work to it, we could kind of define, given enemy who's fanatical and willing to fight to the last, this is what it is, or normal withdrawal attrition rates given historical context. I know the DuPuy Institute has some research on this in their databases from large-scale combat operations, but I can't quite recall it all. I'd have to re-research it, and it doesn't seem like the Army as an institution has this information published somewhere yet. To review, kind of a shameless plug, I did kind of talk about the art and science of shaping the deep in doctrine in a previous video called the Infantry Battalion Attack in Depth Operational Framework. Please go check it out. I'll link it down in the description. It really talks about what ATP 394-2 Deep Operations has, and a bunch of others. It would be way simpler to go look at that than add 30 minutes onto this presentation and report right now. Now, do know the ATP 360 targeting has a new joint publication, and that would be the good one to use. Bottom line takeaway is I do think the art and science and doctrine, the techniques, tactics, procedures could use updating and clarifying. So to conclude, the kill contracts, right, help define how to set conditions for operations favorably, right? Using a tool such as the reviewed Kill Contract Tool or some other tool that a unit's developed can help focus the team on the who, where, and when, right, to meet the how to set the conditions. Because you gotta take bites out of the elephant, and the timing and sequence and the location of that matters. If you try and shape enemy counter mobility dig assets after they've already developed their deliberate defense, that's not going to shape anything. That's going to be a waste of class 5 and time. There seems to be many TTPs and lessons learned at the operational level that still need to be templated and added to doctrine. I got a sense from the great OCTs from the Mission Command Training Program who worked with us that they've seen a lot of what the divisions and corps are doing, the tools and templates, and they what should right look like, what processes should be in place, what products and outputs should be generated. And I know Call, the Center for Army Lessons Learned, publishes a lot of the good books there, but more needs to be done and published across the force. Maybe there should be more stuff on Mill Suite, or maybe it's there and I haven't located it yet. But I do notice more of a learning curve needed for the entire force, and a lot of that will always be there as new personnel move and come into new positions. It's the circle of life. Now, the call from tool, the correlation of forces tool, needs to be updated. It's old. It's got one potential adversary. It needs more. It needs more flexibility on different types of engagements. And I wonder if G2, TRADOC G2, the owners of Odin and the DATE, Decisive Action Training Environment, should take it over and maintain it. Even if they had, an unclassed and then a classified version, where the unclassified version was kind of close to their websites that they have, the great resources that they have for units to practice at home station. I think that would be a great solution and a huge step forward for us to be able to work on this and practice it more frequently. It's not cliche to me. We've got to have the sets and reps to learn through experience, the experiential learning, right, from CIFTIC, right, the adult learning model. It matters. So you have to have the information and the tools available to be able to use it. That's why I think TRADOC should take it over. It should be an unclassified version that's accessible to everybody at home station to be able to practice during their training I'm a National Guardsman, so during IDTs or AT, and not solely at the secret events. So anyway, thank you for your time to watch and listen and consider the information I've presented. Again, please share information in formats and tools and places. If you already know that this has been developed better. I'm new to this level. This is some of the stuff our team and I developed that seemed helpful. So thank you and have a good one.